own power. Most people haven't even begun to tap into the power of their own thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Yet they're brimming with untapped potential. I like to help them discover what's possible for them. If you'd like to chat with me about what's possible for you, just give me a call or email me. And you might be surprised at what we discover together that's possible for you. You might be surprised and delighted. Today, we're going to talk about self-sabotage. Familiar with that term? You may have experienced it yourself. Most people have. But the question today is, what does your brain function, dopamine, and the neurons in your brain have to do with self-sabotage? So often when we talk about self-sabotage, we're talking about paradigms, limiting beliefs. Today we're going to talk about the physical aspect of things. What's really going on when it comes to self-sabotage? Well, research tells us that 95% of people who set goals do not follow through with what they're trying to create. And they don't really know why this is happening. So if you're one of those people, you're not alone by a long shot. Most people procrastinate because of limiting beliefs, and these limiting beliefs do play a part in the actions that they take, and they don't produce the actions needed to create successful behaviors. But it goes really beyond just limiting beliefs even. We know that procrastination in and of itself is self-sabotage. Say that 3 times fast. But here's the scientific reason why this happens. When we make plans for ourselves, um, like creating a successful business or even developing a relationship, perhaps our goal is to change our body in some way, our brain tends to look at those things as future events. And our brain might say, okay, I can deal with that. I can get on board with that. But when it comes down to making immediate decisions related to that goal, the brain prefers to stay consistent with instant gratification. That's really what the brain is looking for all the time. It's more interested in what immediate payoff can be experienced. It might be on board with your long-term goals, but it holds more value in the present moment satisfaction. Why does it do this? There's your answer: dopamine. You know, in the brain, we have neurotransmitters that send signals between neurons. Neurotransmitters are chemicals made by our nerve cells, and they're used to communicate messages from across the brain, also to the rest of the body. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it sends signals to the brain related to our movement and our motivation. It's known as the feel-good neurotransmitter, and that's because when we do something that's pleasurable, it might be eating food that we like, it might be when we meet new people or see people we haven't seen in a long time and we get excited. It might just be watching a movie or going for a walk. Anything that creates pleasure and satisfaction releases dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is like the brain's candy. It's the reason why people get addicted to things, because of the dopamine dump that happens when they do a certain thing. Whether it's drugs, might be cigarettes, could be shopping, um, even things like social media. People are addicted to that as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the reason for that addiction really is the dopamine rush that the brain experiences whenever you do this activity. So it is a reward system to the brain and the body because it boosts the mood, it boosts attention, and it motivates us in specific ways. It motivates our physical behavior, our activity. And it is common for dopamine levels to fluctuate. And low dopamine is linked to low enthusiasm, low attention span, and decreased motivation. So why does that happen for us at times? We'll talk about that in a moment too. So dopamine, this neurotransmitter that is a reward system for the brain, can be a blessing and a curse, as it turns out. But what we're going to talk about today is how you can train your brain to release dopamine at appropriate times for your benefit rather than your detriment, rather than your self-sabotage. Because dopamine can actually drive us to successful outcomes because it is dopamine that motivates us. And we can use that to our advantage intentionally. So, how do we train our brains to begin rewarding us for things that will drive us towards success? How do we train our brains so that it will cause us to behave in ways that are consistent with the success that we want? Well, there were a series of psychological studies done by Dr. Walter Mischel. He was a Stanford professor. And you may be familiar with this test that was done. It's a very long-standing psychological study. So you might be familiar with it. He tested hundreds of children, mostly between the ages of 4 and 5 years old. Each child was brought into a private room, and the researcher seated them at a table. And he gave each child a marshmallow placed in front of them. And sometimes it was a cookie. It started out with as a marshmallow. And the researcher told them that if they could not touch that marshmallow until he came back, he was going to leave the room for a few moments. And if they could wait till he got back, he would give them another marshmallow. So they would get double the reward for a little bit of self-discipline. Well, many of the young kids hit that marshmallow as soon as the researcher hit the door. They couldn't wait. They needed instant gratification. Well, when the researcher came back, no extra treat. Others did wait, and they did receive a double reward. For some, it was very easy. It was like, of course, I want that other marshmallow. For others, they struggled with it. They looked at it, they wanted it, they might reach for it and hold back and turn their face purposely away from it, turn their chair around. Some struggled and lost, they caved. Others struggled and managed to wait. So whether it was easy or whether it was difficult, because they waited, they received that reward. That's encouraging for us to know, because it might not be so easy for us at first to learn how to train our brain, but we can. So as the children became older, they were followed through their life in many areas of their life. The researchers tracked their progress. And you might find it interesting that the individuals who delayed gratification when they were kids were marked as being, and I'll just read it from the research, academically and socially competent, verbally fluent, rational, attentive, planful. They were able to deal with frustration and stress, and they were reported to have higher scholastic performance. The children were followed into adulthood for over 40 years. And the overall conclusion was the ones who waited for the higher reward were consistently reported as more successful in all areas of their life than the children who chose instant gratification. I think we call that a clue, don't you? You might not have thought of it that way before for us, but it totally speaks to self-sabotage. The ones who were able to wait for their gratification were more likely to succeed in their goals. So we call that a clue. So now that we know that, it's important to know that the brain develops habits based on what it considers to be the reward, which of course in the brain's case is dopamine. When the brain gets used to feeling a certain way due to the dopamine dump, the dopamine reward, it starts going there more and more often because it's familiar, it's easy to do, and it's going to be rewarded. So if the brain dismisses long-term goals in order to get instant gratification, and that action might detour you from your long-term goal, it's because the brain has created a habit to do that. So the activities that get rewarded the most with those dopamine rushes are the ones that will become a habit. Sometimes we have habits and if we're not paying attention, we don't even realize that that is what's going on. But if you teach your brain that a greater reward comes with delayed action, delayed gratification rather, then you can create an automatic new habit that will bring you greater rewards. I love the idea of being able to intentionally create automatic habits that drive us to success rather than leave us feeling like, why am I self-sabotaging myself? Why do I keep doing this? When we update the reward value of our behavior, we can create new habits that drive us towards success. So there's a term in psychology known as implementation intention. It's a strategy that leads to better goal attainment, and it assists in modifying behavior, modifying brain reward, and therefore helps in creating new habits. So we're going to talk about what that looks like right now. When you specify certain goal-oriented behaviors as to when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, how long you're going to do it for. Let's say you said, I'm going to write at my desk for an hour on this day and at this time. You schedule it. This automates action and assists in overcoming procrastination, which we have already identified as self-sabotaging. And as simple as that might sound, it seems like, of course. However, so many entrepreneurs are flying by the seat of their pants all the time. You know, what am I doing today again? Let's see what needs done. But if your activities are scheduled that way, studies show this strategy makes a person much more likely to perform those actions. And in some studies, 5 times more likely. Once you write it down, it's scheduled, you feel more committed to doing it. So first, convince yourself that success can be possible for you. We know success can be possible. Most of the time we think of it as being possible for other people, but convince yourself that you can be wildly successful. And even if you don't believe it deep down yet, just keep repeating this thought over and over again until you can prove it to yourself. And with the strategy, you actually can. So take out a piece of paper and make 2 columns. And this is going to be using the implementation intentions strategy. So what are you going to do with those 2 columns? In the first column, write a list of committed actions that you're going to take. You're going to follow through with the actions that will lead you toward your success. And you write down what you're going to do. That's in the first column. And in the second column, write down a list of rewards you will allow yourself for taking those actions and completing them. So these are daily actions and daily rewards. The rewards are super important. You know, a lot of times we're making lists all the time, but that's all we're doing. It's like, I'm going to do this and that and this and that. Most of the time it's not scheduled, it's just a list, and we hope to get it done. But we're not putting down a reward for doing those things. We're rewarding ourselves for a lot of other things or for nothing, just because we want to do this or that, and we just do this or that. But if we intentionally attach a reward to our actions that are going to lead us to our ultimate goal, now we're training our brain as to when to release dopamine and keep us motivated. Remember, this neurotransmitter is attached to our movement and our motivation. So you can teach your brain that it will receive a reward after doing something that would move you towards success. And doing it this way will also help to keep you from depleting your dopamine levels earlier in the day that would decrease motivation. Remember, lower levels of dopamine do decrease energy, they decrease motivation, they decrease enthusiasm. And so, how could we deplete our stores of dopamine early in the day? Remember, we mentioned early on that many people wake up first thing in the morning, they have their phone, they're looking at their email, they're looking at their social media. And whenever they're doing that, they're getting a dopamine hit in the brain. And a lot of times people will do those things that are pleasurable, even like maybe having a cup of coffee, dopamine, if it's something you really love to do. But they use up their dopamine stores by doing things they like to do early on. So by the time 3 o'clock in the afternoon hits, you have no motivation. You ever hit the wall at 3 or 4 in the afternoon? It might be because you've already depleted your brain of dopamine. So train your brain. It's kind of like time release, right? You can do this, and it will help you motivate you towards success all day, every day. Another thing to do is to remove distractions that create instant gratification. For example, you're writing an article, you're creating a newsletter, you're maybe blogging, doing something like that. And so you're busy on your computer typing, creating, and boom, here comes a Facebook notification. Aren't we tempted to just click on, oh, so-and-so, and you click off you go. Somebody calls, get a notification on email. And so all these distractions take you away from what you're trying to accomplish. And your brain is loving it. Your brain actually craves distractions. So because why? Because it's rewarded. Every time you're distracted, it's rewarded. So go to the Facebook posts. Go ahead and call that person back after you've completed your task. Now you're training your brain that it will be rewarded after you do what you need to do. Pretty soon it will move you to do what you need to do so that it will get that reward. Another thing that's very helpful is if you make sure that you have everything you need before you get started, if you're working on something at your desk. What do I mean by that? Well, how often do you interrupt yourself? Jumping up to get this, jumping up to get that. Oh, I want another cup of coffee. I need some snacks. I need a Kleenex. Whatever it is. Before you sit down, just take stock of what you might need so that you have it. And you can dedicate that time to getting done what needs to be done. It might be phone calls. You don't have a list of people that you need to call. If you have everything that you need, you're not going to be constantly interrupting yourself, going to get something else. So another thing that some do that really helps their mindset, mindset is everything, is they put something on the wall in front of them. It might be a quote. It might be a sign. I know one person who is very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Hers is very simple. She just put procrastination feels terrible. Success feels great. That works for her because she's working away. She's looking at that, reminding herself that she doesn't want to procrastinate. Jim Rohn said, discipline weighs ounces. Regret weighs tons. Well, that could be something in front of you on the wall. There's a zillion different things that you can put there. But it's just the idea of having something in front of you that will keep you motivated, to keep reminding you of your mission, keep reminding you that you're making a change, Maybe remind you of your why. Why are you doing this? Why is it so important that you stall the dopamine dump? Once you know that the behavior with the biggest reward is going to be the one that you'll act out automatically, now you can train your brain. Give yourself positive rewards linked to increased dopamine levels. When you do this, you create automatic behaviors that become habitual and that drive you towards success. So often I ask the question, are you in control of your mindset, or is your mindset controlling you? When you practice this strategy, your habitual way of thinking will be your best friend instead of maybe, feeling like your enemy. So maybe it's time to upgrade the reward system that you're giving your brain. When you do this, you'll train your brain to create automatic success in your life. So, what does your brain function, dopamine, and neurons have to do with self-sabotage? A lot. So I hope you find this helpful, and by all means, connect with me, because we could actually go over this together. That strategy that we put together about your list of tasks or activities and rewards. You might be thinking, well, what kind of rewards could I do? What can I put down? And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It could just be little things, but it just puts you in the driver's seat. So this is Leanne Cannon with Mindset Matters, reminding you that your mindset matters, and it matters a lot.